Dr. Rachel Foster stepped through the massive vault entrance, her helmet lights cutting through darkness that had existed for 3,000 years. The air inside was stale and cold, preserved by systems so ancient that no one in the galaxy remembered who built them. Behind her, the xenoarchaeology team spread out across the chamber, their equipment humming softly as scanners mapped every surface. The vault was enormous. The ceiling stretched up into shadows beyond the reach of their lights. The walls disappeared into the distance on all sides. And covering every available surface were tablets. 10,000 of them, arranged in perfect geometric rows that seemed to go on forever. Each tablet was made of some kind of crystalline material that caught the light and held it, making the symbols carved into their surfaces seem to glow faintly. Rachel moved closer to the nearest wall. The tablets were roughly half a meter square, each one covered in swirling symbols and patterns. The markings were intricate and precise, clearly the work of an advanced civilization. They looked important. They looked meaningful. And according to every expert in the galaxy, they were completely unreadable. Magnificent, is it not? Council Director Thelvar moved up beside her. His translator device rendered his whistling Kixen speech into flat English words. 3 millennia my people have sought entry to this vault. The knowledge contained here could change everything we know. Rachel barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the tablet in front of her. The symbols weren't random. There were patterns. Progressions. Things that repeated. Her mind started working automatically, the way it always did when she encountered a puzzle. She had spent her entire career studying how ancient civilizations communicated, how they preserved information, how they tried to speak across the barriers of time and culture. But this was different. Something about these symbols made her skin prickle, made her heart beat faster, made some deep part of her brain start sending alarm signals. Dr. Foster? Her assistant, Tom Bradley, touched her shoulder gently. Are you feeling okay? You look really pale. Rachel took a step back from the tablet. Then another. She turned slowly, looking around the entire chamber with new understanding. The arrangement of the tablets. The way the symbols were organized. The color patterns she could see repeating across multiple surfaces. It all suddenly made horrible sense. These aren't instructions, she said quietly. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. These aren't historical records. These aren't technical specifications or star charts or anything like that. Thelvar's head swiveled toward her, his compound eyes reflecting the tablet glow. Then what are they, human? Our finest linguists have studied recovered fragments for centuries. Our most advanced translation systems have analyzed every pattern. Our artificial intelligence networks have compared these symbols to every known language in galactic history. Nothing matches. Nothing even comes close. Rachel looked at the council director. Then at the 3 other alien scientists who had come with him. A Vexian whose tentacles were busy recording everything with multiple cameras. A Drafnian who stood silent and tall, her scales shifting colors slowly. A Karathi whose mechanical enhancements clicked softly as he processed data streams. That's because you've been trying to read them, Rachel said. You've been treating them like a language, like a code to be broken or a cipher to be solved. But they're not meant to be read that way. They're not meant to appeal to logic or intellect. She pointed at the tablet behind her. They're meant to be felt. They're designed to trigger something deeper than thought. Something more primitive. These are warnings. The Vexian scientist made a dismissive gesture with his primary manipulator. Impossible. Humans have been traveling in space for only 200 years. Your species lacks the historical context necessary to understand artifacts from the ancient periods. You have no frame of reference for civilizations that existed before your ancestors even developed written language. We have exactly the right frame of reference, Rachel said firmly. She moved to another tablet, her finger tracing the air above its surface without touching it. Look at the color progression here. See how it starts with red at the top, then shifts to yellow in the middle, then ends in black at the bottom? That's not arbitrary. That's a warning sequence. She pointed to another section. And look at these geometric shapes. See how they start orderly and organized up here? Then they become more chaotic and broken as they move down? That's showing degradation. Destruction. Things falling apart. Tom came closer, his own eyes starting to widen with recognition. Oh no, she's right. Look at these figures here. They're depicted moving away from this central icon. They're running. Rachel pulled out her portable computer and called up files she had stored years ago. Images floated in the air above her hand. Ancient human symbols and signs. Warning markers from Earth's own history. In the late 20th century, my planet faced a unique problem. she explained to the silent aliens around her. We had created nuclear waste. Radioactive materials that would remain deadly for 10,000 years or more. We needed to warn future humans about the danger. But we realized something terrifying. We couldn't guarantee that humans 10,000 years in the future would speak our languages. They might not understand our writing. They might have completely different cultures and reference points. She expanded the holographic display, showing design proposals and psychological studies. So we had to create warning systems that could transcend language entirely. We studied human psychology. We researched which colors and patterns triggered fear responses across all cultures. We designed symbols that would make people want to leave without necessarily understanding why. Rachel gestured at the tablets around them. We used color because certain colors trigger automatic responses in biological systems. Red for danger. Yellow for caution. Black for death. We used progression to show cause and effect. We used chaotic geometry because disorder triggers discomfort in most thinking minds. We used figures fleeing because the urge to run from danger is universal. She pulled up an image of a proposed nuclear waste warning monument from Earth. A massive structure covered in spikes and angular, hostile shapes. Faces carved in stone that expressed horror and pain. Colors that made the eye want to look away. Next to it, she placed an image of one of the tablets. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The vault became very quiet. Even the equipment seemed to hum more softly. The alien scientists stared at the comparison Rachel had created. They looked at the tablets with new eyes. This cluster here, Tom said, his voice shaking slightly. It's depicting contamination spread. Like a disease or radiation moving through a population. And this one shows structural collapse. Buildings or maybe entire planets breaking apart. Rachel moved to another tablet. Then another. Each one she examined made her feel colder inside. These aren't just warnings. They're markers for disaster sites. Places where something went terribly wrong. And whoever made these wanted to make absolutely certain that future civilizations would know to stay away. Rachel spent the next 3 days in the vault, barely sleeping. She moved from tablet to tablet with Tom and a small team of human researchers, documenting everything. The council scientists watched with growing unease as the humans worked with an efficiency that seemed impossible. How can you read them so quickly? The Drafnian scientist asked. Her name was Soralyn, and her scales had shifted to a deep purple that indicated confusion. Our team spent months analyzing single fragments. You are interpreting hundreds. Rachel paused in front of a tablet that made her stomach turn. The symbols on this one were particularly disturbing. Sharp angular patterns that seemed to cut into each other. A color scheme that shifted from sickly green to bruised purple to absolute black. Figures that weren't running but falling, tumbling into something vast and empty. Because we're not trying to translate words, Rachel explained. She pointed at the tablet without touching it. We're reading emotions. Look at this. The green here isn't just a color choice. It's the green of sickness. Of poison. Of things that shouldn't be consumed. Every human who looks at this feels nauseated, even if they don't know why. Tom was across the chamber, his face pale in the tablet glow. Rachel, you need to see this one. She crossed to where he stood. The tablet he had found was larger than the others, positioned at the center of a cluster of smaller ones. The symbols on it were different. More complex. They showed what looked like a star, rendered in brilliant white and gold. Then that same star, distorted and stretched. Then exploding outward in a cascade of red and black. Stellar collapse, Rachel whispered. This is marking a location where a star went supernova. But look at these around it, Tom said, gesturing to the smaller tablets nearby. They show the same progression. The same warning pattern. But the details are different. This one looks like it's depicting some kind of biological hazard. See the way these organic shapes spread out from a central point. Rachel studied the tablet carefully. The shapes did look organic. They branched and grew in ways that suggested life but twisted life. Corrupted life. And the figures depicted alongside them were clearly suffering. Their forms were contorted in ways that suggested pain. Plague world, she said. This is marking a planet where some kind of disease outbreak occurred. She stepped back and looked at the entire wall. The tablets weren't arranged randomly. They were grouped by type. By category of disaster. She could see it now once she understood what she was looking at. They organized them, she said aloud. Whoever created this vault, they sorted the warnings by the kind of danger they represented. Over the next several hours, Rachel and her team mapped out the classification system. One section of the vault contained warnings about stellar phenomena. Supernovas, black hole formations, gamma-ray bursts. Another section dealt with biological hazards. Plagues, genetic corruption, species mutations that had gone wrong. A third section showed technological disasters. Explosions, reactor failures, weapons that had destroyed their creators. But the section that disturbed Rachel most was the one Tom found near the back of the vault. "These are different," he called out. "The symbols here don't match the others. They're more abstract. More conceptual." Rachel joined him and felt her breath catch. These tablets didn't show physical disasters. They showed something harder to depict. Something that required more complex symbolic language. The images showed what looked like reality itself breaking apart. Spaces that folded wrong. Dimensions that intersected in ways they shouldn't. Figures that existed in multiple places at once, their forms stretched across impossible geometries. "Dimensional rifts," Rachel said quietly. "They're warning about experiments that broke the fabric of space itself." Council Director Thelvar had been observing from a distance, but now he approached. "You cannot possibly know that from simple images. You are speculating. Projecting your own fears onto ancient symbols." Rachel turned to face him. "Am I?" "Tom, pull up tablet reference 742. The one we logged this morning." Tom brought up the image on his portable display. The tablet showed a clear sequence. A civilization depicted by organized geometric shapes representing cities or structures. Then those same structures beginning a project shown by figures working on something large and complex. Then the project activating depicted by energy radiating outward. And finally, everything dissolving into chaos. The structures breaking apart. The figures scattered or simply gone. And in the center a void. A nothing. A space where reality had been torn away. "That's not a supernova," Rachel said. "It's not a natural disaster. The sequence clearly shows cause and effect. They built something. They activated it. And it destroyed them." She walked along the wall of dimensional rift warnings. "There are 53 tablets in this section. 53 separate incidents where someone created technology that ripped holes in the universe. And judging by the warning intensity, none of those civilizations survived to fix their mistakes." The vault seemed colder suddenly. The alien scientists had all gathered now, staring at the section Rachel had identified. The implications were sinking in. "But this isn't even the worst part," Rachel said. She had continued mapping while the others processed what she had found. "There's another section. Smaller. More isolated." She led them to a far corner of the vault. 13 tablets stood apart from all the others. They were marked with symbols that combined elements from all the other categories. Stellar phenomena, biological hazards, technological disasters, and dimensional rifts. But there was something else too. A pattern that appeared on all 13. "These show something recurring," Rachel explained. "Look at the sequence on this first one. A civilization rises. They discover technology. They expand across multiple worlds. They become advanced and confident. And then they encounter warnings. Markers left by previous civilizations. But they ignore them." She moved to the second tablet. The sequence continues. The civilization proceeds with dangerous research despite the warnings. They believe they are too smart to fail. Too advanced to make the same mistakes. And then disaster strikes. The same disasters that were warned about. Tom was recording everything, his hands shaking slightly. And the civilization disappears. "Completely," Rachel confirmed. She moved down the line of 13 tablets. Each one told the same story with slight variations. Different civilizations. Different time periods. Different specific technologies. But the same pattern. The same fatal overconfidence. The same refusal to heed warnings from the past. "These 13 tablets aren't just warnings about specific disasters," Rachel said. "They're warnings about the pattern itself. They're saying that this keeps happening. That advanced civilizations keep making the same mistake. They keep believing that warnings don't apply to them." Sorlin's scales had turned almost white. "You are saying that 13 galactic civilizations fell because they ignored warnings like these?" "At least 13, Rachel corrected. "These are just the ones someone survived long enough to document." The silence in the vault was profound. The alien scientists looked at each other with what Rachel recognized as fear, even across species barriers. They were beginning to understand what the vault really was. Not a treasure house of ancient knowledge. Not a repository of lost technology. But a graveyard. A memorial. A desperate message from the dead to the living. "Stay away. Learn from us. Do not repeat our mistakes." Rachel stood in the command center of the research vessel, holographic displays floating in the air around her. 6 weeks had passed since the vault discovery. 6 weeks of cross-referencing, data analysis, and expeditions to sites marked on the tablets. And 6 weeks of growing horror as the evidence mounted. Another match, Tom said from his station. He looked exhausted. They all did. The Sector 7 mystery. Council records show that an entire colonization fleet disappeared there 900 years ago. No trace. No wreckage. No distress signals. Just gone. He brought up the coordinates on the main display. Then he overlaid the location data Rachel had extracted from tablet 4216. The coordinates matched perfectly. That's 70%, Rachel said quietly. 70% of all the unexplained disappearances in Council history correspond to locations marked on those tablets. The command center held 20 researchers now, both human and alien. They had been working in shifts, comparing the tablet warnings against thousands of years of galactic records. Every match they found made the picture clearer and more disturbing. Soralyn moved closer to the display, her scales a troubled gray. The Sector 7 fleet was over 300 ships. 15,000 colonists. How could tablets created thousands of years before the Council even existed know that location would be dangerous? Because whatever killed that fleet was already there, Rachel said. Already waiting. The tablets aren't predicting the future. They're marking permanent hazards. Places where something went wrong so badly that the danger never went away. She pulled up another comparison. The Void of Karath. Council records say it's a region of space where ships experience navigation failures and life support malfunctions. Most ships avoid it now because of the disappearances. But look at this tablet. The image showed a clear warning sequence. Ships approaching a specific region. Systems failing. Crews depicted in obvious distress. And at the center, symbols that suggested something fundamentally wrong with space itself in that area. The tablet creators knew about the Void of Karath, Tom said. Thousands of years before the Council discovered it. Not just knew about it, Rachel corrected. They tried to warn everyone away from it. And we found 47 other locations like this. Places that Council ships have learned to avoid through bitter experience. Places that killed enough people that they finally got marked as hazardous on navigation charts. She gestured at the floating displays. The tablets were trying to save future civilizations from having to learn these lessons the hard way. But no one could read them. So ships kept disappearing. Colonies kept failing. People kept dying in places that had already been marked as death traps. A Karathi researcher named Plex spoke up, his mechanical voice synthesizer making his words sound flat. This suggests the tablet creators mapped hazards across the entire galaxy. The scope of that undertaking would be enormous. It would require thousands of years and countless expeditions. Or one really catastrophic experience, Rachel said grimly. She had been studying the 13 tablets that showed the recurring pattern. The ones that depicted civilizations ignoring warnings and being destroyed. I think the tablet creators were survivors. I think they belonged to a civilization that ignored warnings from someone even older. And they paid the price for that mistake. She pulled up detailed scans of the vault walls themselves, not just the tablets. Look at this. The vault construction shows evidence of extreme age. But it also shows evidence of extreme haste. Whoever built this was working fast. Like they were running out of time. Tom enlarged a section of the scan. These stress fractures in the walls. They're consistent with the vault being sealed while construction was still technically incomplete. Some of these support structures weren't finished properly. They were desperate, Rachel said. They had knowledge that needed to be preserved. Warnings that needed to be passed on. But they didn't have time to do it perfectly. So they did it fast, hoping it would be enough. She walked closer to the main display, studying the tablet images they had cataloged. The question is, why 17 vaults? Why not put everything in one location? The answer came from an unlikely source. A young Vexian analyst named Corinne had been studying the mathematical patterns in how the tablets were arranged. Dr. Foster, I believe I have found something. The tablets are not randomly distributed within the vault. They follow a coordinate system. He brought up his analysis. The arrangement of tablets, when mapped in 3 dimensions, created a structure. A pattern. And at specific points within that pattern were tablets that differed from all the others. They were blank except for a single set of coordinates. 17 tablets with coordinates, Corinne said. Each one marked with directional symbols. I believe these are pointing to the other vaults. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. Show me the coordinates. Corinne displayed them one by one. Each set of coordinates represented a location somewhere in the galaxy. Rachel began cross-referencing them against known space, known hazards, and explored regions. 2 of these are in Council territory, she said. 3 more are in the border regions. The rest are in uncharted space or regions we haven't explored yet. Tom was already running probability calculations. If the distribution pattern holds and if each vault contains roughly 10,000 tablets like this one, we're looking at 170,000 warnings total. 170,000 documented disasters spread across the galaxy. The number hung in the air like a weight. 170,000 ways that civilizations could fail. 170,000 mistakes that someone had made and tried to warn others about. We need to find the other vaults, Rachel said. We need to decode all of them. This isn't just ancient history. These warnings are still relevant. Ships are still disappearing in marked locations. Colonies are still being established in hazard zones. The Council is still funding research into technologies that have these same warning patterns. Council Director Thelvar had been observing remotely, but now his image appeared in the command center. Dr. Foster, the Council has been reviewing your findings. There is significant debate about how to proceed. Rachel turned to face the holographic image. Debate about what? About whether to read the warnings. About whether to take them seriously. About whether to make this information public, Thelvar said carefully. Some Council members fear that revealing the existence of so many hazards could cause panic. Could destabilize trade routes and colonization efforts. Could undermine confidence in galactic expansion. Rachel stared at him in disbelief. You're considering suppressing this information. You're actually thinking about hiding warnings that could save lives. We are considering the broader implications, Thelvar replied. The economic impact. The social consequences. The political ramifications of admitting that the Council has been inadvertently sending citizens into documented danger zones for centuries. People are dying, Rachel said, her voice hard. People are dying in places where someone thousands of years ago tried to warn them away. And you want to hide that because it might be inconvenient? She looked around at her team. Humans and aliens alike, all exhausted from weeks of work. All committed to understanding the warnings. All increasingly aware of how urgent this was. The tablets weren't just marking disasters, Rachel said. They were marking a pattern. Advanced civilizations that had the information they needed to survive but chose not to use it. Civilizations that prioritized comfort and convenience over safety. Civilizations that thought they knew better than the warnings. She turned back to Thelvar's image. The Council is about to become one of those civilizations. You're proving exactly what those 13 tablets were trying to warn about. That intelligence and advancement mean nothing if you don't have the wisdom to listen. Rachel had not slept in 36 hours. She sat alone in the vault at 3 in the morning, station time, staring at a tablet she had found tucked away in a corner section. This one was different from the others. More detailed. More personal. It showed a sequence that made her chest tight with recognition and dread. The tablet depicted a civilization at its height. Massive structures reaching into space. Ships traveling between stars. Figures working together in what was clearly meant to represent harmony and advancement. Then the sequence showed them building something. A device or facility rendered in careful detail. The symbols around it suggested research. Experimentation. Pushing boundaries. The next panel showed the device active. Energy patterns that looked like tears in fabric. Spaces that folded in on themselves. The dimensional rift symbols Rachel had learned to recognize. But these were different. More controlled at first. More deliberate. Then everything fell apart. The tears widened. The folds multiplied. The controlled experiment became an uncontrolled catastrophe. The final panel showed nothing. Just empty space where the civilization had been. Not destroyed. Not scattered. Simply erased. Rachel had seen dozens of disaster sequences in the tablets by now. But this one had something the others lacked. In the corner, rendered smaller than the other figures, was a group shown escaping. Moving away from the catastrophe. Surviving. And in their hands they carried tablets. They were the ones who made the vault. Tom's voice came from behind her. She had not heard him approach. The survivors of whatever that disaster was. They're the ones who created this entire warning system. Rachel nodded slowly. They didn't want it to happen again. They had ignored warnings themselves and it cost them everything. So they spent whatever time they had left trying to make sure other civilizations wouldn't make the same mistakes. Tom sat down beside her, holding his own portable display. Rachel, I've been analyzing the technical details in this sequence. the device they were building, the way the energy patterns are depicted. I cross-referenced it with current Council research projects. He pulled up files marked with Council security classifications. Rachel raised an eyebrow at that, but Tom waved away the concern. I still have access from my previous clearance. Look at this. Project Threshold. Council research into barrier manipulation. They're trying to create stable pathways between dimensional spaces. Shortcuts through reality itself. Rachel looked at Tom's display, then back at the tablet. The similarities were unmistakable. The basic principles were the same. The energy patterns matched. The Council was researching the exact technology that had destroyed the tablet creators. We have to tell them, Rachel said. We have to show them this tablet. Make them understand they're walking the same path. I already tried, Tom said quietly. I sent the analysis to the Council Science Directorate yesterday. I got a response this morning. He pulled up the message. Rachel read it with growing anger. The Council scientists had dismissed the comparison. They called it superficial. They said the tablet depictions were too primitive and too vague to represent actual technology. They said human interpretation of alien symbols could not possibly be accurate enough to judge advanced Council research. The message ended with a polite but firm request that Rachel's team stop interfering with important scientific work. They think we're being superstitious, Rachel said. They think we're seeing patterns that aren't there. That we're primitive humans who don't understand real science. Over the next week, Rachel tried every official channel she could access. She presented her findings to Council oversight committees. She sent detailed reports to safety boards. She requested meetings with the researchers working on Project Threshold. Every attempt hit a wall of dismissal and bureaucracy. The Council scientists were polite but condescending. Yes, the tablets were interesting. Yes, the warnings were probably valid for their original context. But Council technology was far more advanced than anything the tablet creators could have imagined. Modern safety protocols were comprehensive. The risks were being managed by the best minds in the galaxy. Rachel sat in her quarters after another rejected presentation, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the 13 tablets. The ones showing the recurring pattern. Civilizations that had information. Civilizations that chose not to use it. Civilizations that believed they were too advanced to fail. They're doing it again, she said aloud. They're proving the pattern right. Tom knocked and entered without waiting for a response. He looked worried. The Council just issued a directive. All tablet research is being classified. We're being asked to turn over our translations and analysis. They want complete control over what information gets released and to whom. Rachel stood up slowly. They're going to suppress it. They're going to hide the warnings because the warnings make them uncomfortable. Because the warnings question their judgment. What do we do? Tom asked. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would likely end her career with the Council. We do what the tablet creators should have done earlier. We make sure the information gets out. We make sure people who will actually listen have access to the warnings. Over the next 72 hours, Rachel and Tom worked in secret. They copied every tablet translation, every analysis, every cross-reference with Council records. They compiled it into formats that were easy to distribute and understand. And then they sent it out. Human colonies received the data first. Independent stations on the frontier. Free traders and explorers who operated outside Council jurisdiction. Academic institutions that valued knowledge over politics. News networks that specialized in investigative reporting. Anyone who might care more about truth than convenience. Rachel included personal messages with each transmission. She explained what the tablets were. What they meant. Why the warnings mattered. She made it clear that these were not her interpretations but patterns that any human could recognize. She encouraged people to look at the evidence themselves. To make their own judgments. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, the translations were everywhere. Independent researchers confirmed Rachel's interpretations. Historians began correlating Council disappearances with tablet warnings. Safety advocates started demanding that Council shipping routes be revised to avoid marked hazard zones. And most importantly, the Project Threshold research became public knowledge. Scientists outside the Council began pointing out the similarities between the barrier technology experiments and the disaster sequence on the tablets. Safety concerns that Council oversight had ignored suddenly had public attention. Rachel knew there would be consequences. The Council contacted her within a week. Council Director Thelvar appeared in her quarters via hologram, his compound eyes glittering with what she interpreted as anger. Dr. Foster, You have violated multiple security protocols. You have released classified information without authorization. You have undermined council authority and created public panic. There will be disciplinary action. Good, Rachel said calmly. I hope there is. I hope it's very public. Because then we can have a conversation about why the council was classifying life-saving information in the first place. Thelvar's translator rendered his next sounds as something close to a growl. You do not understand the complexities involved. The project threshold research is carefully monitored. The risks are acceptable. Your interference is based on primitive fear, not scientific analysis. Rachel pulled up the tablet sequence on her display. Do you know what this shows? It shows a civilization that said exactly what you just said. That believed exactly what you believe. That thought they were being careful and scientific and rational. And then it shows them being erased from existence. Ancient superstition, Thelvar said dismissively. Then explain the 70% correlation, Rachel shot back. Explain why 70% of council disappearances happen in locations these ancient superstitions warned about. Explain why council ships keep vanishing in the void of Karath when there's a tablet specifically marking it as a death trap. Thelvar did not have an answer for that. Rachel leaned forward. You want to know what I understand? I understand patterns. And the pattern here is crystal clear. You're an advanced civilization with access to warnings from the past. And you're choosing to ignore them because you think you're too smart to make the same mistakes. That's not science. That's arrogance. And according to these tablets, it's exactly the kind of arrogance that has destroyed at least 13 other civilizations. 3 months after Rachel distributed the tablet translations, she was eating lunch in a small cafe on Station Meridian when her communicator exploded with emergency alerts. Tom was calling. So were 4 other members of her research team. So was half the independent news network in the sector. She answered Tom's call first. His face appeared on the small screen, pale and frightened. Rachel, turn on the council emergency broadcast. Right now. She switched feeds and felt her stomach drop. The main council news channel showed chaos. The broadcast came from Research Station Threshold, the primary facility for the barrier technology experiments. Alarms were screaming in the background. Scientists were running past the camera. And in the center of the frame, visible through a massive observation window, was something that should not exist. Space was tearing. Reality itself was coming apart. A dark crack hung in the void, widening slowly, and around its edges the stars looked distorted and wrong. Stretched. Pulled toward the growing tear like water circling a drain. Rachel recognized the pattern instantly. She had seen it depicted on the tablets dozens of times. The dimensional rift. The barrier collapse. The exact disaster the ancient civilization had tried to warn about. How long has it been open? She asked Tom, her voice remarkably steady despite the fear coursing through her. 17 minutes. They were running a test of the barrier generator. Something went wrong. They tried to shut it down, but the rift is self-sustaining now. It's feeding on local space-time and growing. On the broadcast, a Kixan scientist was trying to explain the situation to the reporter. His translator rendered his panicked whistling into broken sentences. The rift was expanding at an increasing rate. At current growth, it would consume the research station in less than an hour. If they could not collapse it, it would continue growing indefinitely. It could eventually consume the entire sector. Rachel was already moving, throwing credits on the table and running for the docking bay. Tom, get to the station. Get every member of our team who can move. We need the tablet reference materials. We need every rift sequence we've documented. What are you thinking? Tom asked, running alongside her through his own location. The tablets don't just show disasters, Rachel said, dodging through crowds of people who were starting to panic as the news spread. They show sequences. Progressions. The ancient civilization documented how these rifts form. Which means they understood the process. And if they understood it, maybe they found ways to stop it. She reached her small transport ship and began emergency launch procedures. Station control was too busy with the crisis to question her departure. Within minutes she was in space, her ship's engines pushing toward research station threshold at maximum acceleration. The journey took 43 minutes. 43 minutes of Rachel pulling up every tablet image related to dimensional rifts. 43 minutes of studying the sequences, looking for patterns she had missed before. Looking for anything that might suggest a solution. She found it in tablet 7912. The sequence showed a rift forming just like the others. But this one had additional panels. They showed energy patterns being directed at specific points around the rift. Not random points. Specific angles and distances that formed a geometric pattern. And in the final panel, the rift was collapsing inward, sealing itself. "Tom, are you there yet?" Rachel called as her ship approached the station. "Just docking now," Tom's voice came back. "Rachel, it's bad. The rift has grown to over 300 meters. Station evacuation is underway, but there's not enough time. If this thing keeps expanding at current rate, it will reach the station in 22 minutes. Rachel transmitted the tablet image to him. "Get this to the council scientists. Tell them they need to create a containment field following this exact geometric pattern. The energy nodes need to be positioned at these specific angles relative to the rift center." There was a pause. Then Tom's voice came back, tight with frustration. "Rachel, they're not listening. The head researcher says the tablet depicts primitive technology. He says their advanced systems are already doing everything possible. He says human interpretation of ancient symbols cannot be trusted for real science." Rachel felt a cold rage settle over her. She brought her ship around to the observation side of the station. Through her viewport she could see the rift clearly now. A wound in space, growing wider with every passing second. And she could see what the council scientists apparently could not. The rift was following the exact same progression shown in the tablets. The way it pulsed. The way the edges rippled. The way the distortion field around it expanded in waves. Every detail matched. She opened a general broadcast channel. "This is Dr. Rachel Foster to all ships in the area. I need volunteers with cargo haulers or any vessel capable of generating a sustained energy field. We have a solution, but we need to implement it now." The response was immediate. A dozen independent ships changed course toward her position. Free traders. Mining vessels. Even a few pleasure craft whose owners had been watching the crisis unfold. Humans mostly, but also some aliens who had been following Rachel's work on the tablets. "Dr. Foster, what do you need?" came a gruff voice from a cargo hauler captain named Sam Wright. Rachel transmitted the tablet diagram to all the volunteer ships. "We need to position our ships in this exact geometric pattern around the rift. Each ship needs to generate maximum output with their deflector shields or energy projectors. We need to create a containment field following this ancient template." "You want us to fly toward that thing?" another captain asked, her voice uncertain. "I want us to close it," Rachel said. "The council scientists are trying to overpower it with brute force. But the tablets show that rifts don't respond to power. They respond to geometry. To precise energy patterns at specific angles. We don't need the biggest generators. We just need the right pattern." There was a moment of silence. Then Sam's voice came back. "Well, I'd rather die trying something than die because some council scientist was too proud to read a warning label. I'm in." One by one the other ships confirmed. 13 vessels total, counting Rachel's small transport. They moved into position, following the coordinates Rachel calculated from the tablet diagram. The council station broadcast warnings at them. Ordered them to clear the area. Threatened them with charges for interfering with official operations. Rachel ignored it all. She positioned her ship at one of the geometric points, her systems straining to maintain the precise location against the gravitational distortions from the rift. Around her the other 12 ships did the same. "On my mark," Rachel said, her hands steady on the controls. "Activate all energy projection systems. Maximum output. Hold position no matter what happens." She counted down. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 13 ships fired their energy systems simultaneously. Deflector shields extended to maximum range. Tractor beam projectors engaged. Mining lasers activated. Every system capable of generating a sustained energy field came online. And the pattern formed. Rachel could see it on her sensors. The energy fields from 13 ships, positioned at precise geometric points, creating a web of force around the rift. Not pushing against it. Not trying to overpower it. Just present. Holding the pattern. For 10 seconds nothing happened. The rift continued to pulse and grow. Rachel felt her ship being pulled toward it despite her engines running at full reverse. Beside her, she could hear other captains struggling to maintain position. Then the rift flickered. The pulsing rhythm changed. The expansion slowed. The edges that had been frayed and chaotic began to smooth out. The geometric pattern was working. The energy web was not fighting the rift but channeling it. Giving the torn spacetime a structure to follow. A path to heal along. "It's working." Tom's voice came through, shouting from somewhere inside the station. "The expansion is reversing. The rift is contracting." Rachel watched through her viewport as the impossible tear in space began to close. slowly at first, then faster. The edges pulled inward, following the lines of energy the 13 ships were projecting. The distortion field collapsed. The bent stars straightened. And after 2 minutes that felt like hours, the rift sealed itself completely. Space was whole again. Rachel slumped in her pilot chair, shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Around her, the other volunteer ships were cheering over the open channels. On the station, she could see through the windows that people were hugging each other, crying, laughing with the relief of survival. The Council emergency broadcast showed stunned scientists staring at their instruments. The rift was gone, completely sealed. No trace remained except for some minor gravitational disturbances that would fade in time. A disaster that should have consumed the sector had been stopped by 13 ships following a pattern from a 10,000-year-old warning tablet. 2 weeks later, Rachel stood in front of the full Galactic Council assembly. The chamber was packed. Every major species had representatives present. The mood was very different from her last council appearance. Council Director Thelvar spoke first, his translator rendering his words with what she recognized as humility. Dr. Foster, the council owes you and your team a profound debt. Your actions saved research station threshold and potentially millions of lives. More than that, you have proven the value of the ancient warnings beyond any doubt. He paused, his compound eyes meeting hers. The council has voted unanimously to authorize your proposed project. You will lead a comprehensive effort to locate and decode all 17 warning vaults. Full funding. Full authority. Full access to any resources you require. Rachel nodded slowly. Thank you, Director. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't my victory. This is humanity's. And it's not because we're smarter than other species. It's because we're more paranoid. She pulled up images of Earth. Pictures of warning signs and hazard markers from throughout human history. Nuclear waste sites. Toxic dump zones. Pandemic quarantine markers. Flood barriers. Earthquake fault lines marked on maps. Humans spent 10,000 years almost destroying ourselves, Rachel said. We came close to extinction more times than we can count. Climate collapse. Nuclear weapons. Engineered plagues. We made every mistake possible and barely survived each one. And that history taught us something valuable. It taught us to recognize warnings. To take them seriously. To err on the side of caution. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of species far older and more advanced than humanity. You call it paranoia. We call it wisdom. The hard-earned wisdom of a species that learned to read its own epitaphs before they were written. That's what we bring to the galaxy. Not superior technology. Not greater intelligence. Just the scars of experience and the humility that comes from knowing how close we came to being another warning in someone else's archive.